Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the computer, digital divide, and minorities. And we have to talk about the digital divide and minorities from Tennessee State University, Mr. Nathaniel Perry. And Mr. Perry, let me welcome you to the show this morning, and to tell you as well as our audience how delighted we are to have you, and to also remind our audience that you've been with us on a number of occasions, and I think more significantly that not only have you been with us on this particular show at an earlier occasion, but in a real sense you are responsible for a lot of things that we have been able to accomplish by way of the internet and by way of web page designs and et cetera, because you helped us design, in a real sense, I think you really literally designed our first web page back in 1995. And so that's why we wanted to have you here today to talk about some of the things dealing with the computer and digital divide. Before we get into our conversation, let's have you to give our audience some information about your background, your education, and some of the things that in a real sense were important that eventually led you to proficiency in on the internet and that kind of information.
Well, I've always been a little geek sometimes, or a nerd, as my next door neighbor used to call me. But my dad got me interested in working with a lot of gadgets like Morse code and all that kind of stuff when I was young. And then after I got into my school at Virginia State University, I had a roommate that was a business major, and he used to do information systems. But they used these cards. They had to pile these cards up, and these cards get fed through the computer, and then they process, and then your output comes out, and you get a lot of data. I didn't quite understand it then, but that was my first experience with working with a computer. Then after I got into the military, they actually started having computers where you didn't have to have all the cards that allowed you to process your data. And we did a lot of reports with the Harvard Graphics, what it was back then. And we were able to present with the computer and do a lot of research on the computer. So after I got that taste in the military, it just built up. After I left the military in '95, I was able to build on what I did learn, the basics in the military, and continue to build and work on that. And got into graphics, got into internet when it first started happening at Tennessee State University, which is where I met you, and was able to develop a keen interest in working with the internet and working with web pages.
You know, one of the problems that we have today is that when we talk about the computer and the internet, and we often talk about what we call the digital divide, and I think that we've talked about it on this show with you and others on a number of occasions. But exactly what do we mean when we talk about the digital divide dealing with the computer and the internet?
Well, I think at one time there was a division of those that actually didn't understand what was happening with the internet and computers, and those that did. And that was the dividing line between those that could and could not. So we gave it a nice little title, but now it's to the point where kids are coming up and they've got their own little iPad, they have their own little computer, which little own telephone, which is actually a computer itself, that can connect to the internet. So everybody's got some kind of contact with the internet, which is actually squashing the divide portion. I think it's getting where the older community is the one that's divide is where it is now. So it's not much of those that are already coming up, because elementary schools, they're actually using internet. And I think Apple is talking about replacing textbooks with the iPad now. So you see a lot of technology changes that divide is starting to wipe out, especially as we start getting older.
And of course, we're getting ready for our first commercial break, and let me simply make a couple of statements in reference to that before we make this break, that the kind of thing that we're talking about was digital divide is no longer a financial kind of thing as it once was, because as you indicated, all of these little small gadgets and whatnot, it's more accessible to folks who at one time were unable to pay $500 for
Exactly.
a desktop, now who can pay $97 for a smartphone and do
Exactly.
essentially the same thing. And I understand that very good. And so in a real sense, we're, as you said, closing that digital divide simply by the mass use of computers and et cetera.
Exactly.
And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.